I have a question for you. As you know, one of the things that I talk about often here is the double standards that men face in today's society and how hypocritical the arguments that are made to justify those double standards often are. And someone recently asked me what I thought was the most hypocritical double standard of all. Now, I have my opinion and I'll share it with you in just a moment. But I also thought it would be great if I asked you to share what you think is the most hypocritical double standard that's out there. So I wanted to ask you to share your thoughts with me. What do you think? There's no right or wrong answer, but I'm genuinely curious what all of you think, and who knows? Maybe I'll turn it into another video. So let me know down in the comments what is the biggest double standard and perhaps how it affects you or how you think it affects men in general. So, what's mine? Well, mine is actually pretty controversial, which speaks to how much of a double standard it is. And that is the double standard that exists when it comes to reproductive rights. More specifically, how women have them, but men, well, men don't. And nothing causes more rage, more rancor, and more, let's call it, negative feedback than when you point that out. Let's face it, it's the core tenet of feminism, the core paradigm that they've built their entire movement upon. Women's reproductive rights is the be-all, end-all of feminism. Hell, there's an entire political party that has built its entire policy platform nationally and locally around it. I mean, show me a single election at any level, federal, state, or local, where women's reproductive rights hasn't been part of the discussion. Now, I double dog dare you to show me even one, anywhere, where men's reproductive rights have even been brought up. While we're bombarded on a daily basis about women having reproductive rights, having a choice as to whether or not they want to be a parent, when was the last time you heard a word? Just one word about men and their reproductive rights. Their right to decide if they want to be a parent or not. Right now, women have an absolute right to make that decision, at least here in the United States, to decide whether or not they want to raise a child. They have the option of using birth control. They have the right to get an abortion. They even have the right under safe haven laws to give up a child post-birth with absolutely no further obligation whatsoever, either through adoption or by simply taking it to a hospital, firehouse, or other approved facility and handing it over. Men don't have any of those rights, not even the right of contraception. In the United States and many other countries, it is well-established case law that men who use contraception, aka condoms, which is really the only option they have as opposed to the many that women do, don't maintain any rights to the contents of said contraception once they dispose of it. To put it in plain English, it's perfectly legal for a woman to go into the trash, take the discarded condom, and use the contents therein to impregnate herself. The man has no say whatsoever in that situation. She can legally force him into paternity, force him into parenthood, and oh, by the way, reap considerable financial benefits along the way. That process, along with other things that women do to force parenthood on men, say things like tampering with the condoms, as in poking holes in them, or lying about her being on birth control, or even, how do I put this? Let's call it extracting fluid from a man when he's in a coma, drunk, or unconscious, is not only perfectly legal, but has a not-so-quaint term applied to it: spermjacking. In all of those situations and those cases, the law as written and in practice supports the woman, supports the crime, as it were, and no one bats an eye. You certainly aren't going to hear feminists bringing it up in their reproductive right arguments. You certainly aren't going to hear politicians or the media talking about it. Truth is, you aren't going to hear anyone talking about it. Why? Because it's fully condoned, fully supported. Hell, I'll even argue fully encouraged. It speaks to the complete and utter hypocrisy of the entire pro-choice argument. But there's an even more egregious example that was recently in the news. So a South Korean actress, one Lee Si-young, just admitted to using her ex-husband's sperm to get pregnant via IVF without his consent. Let me say that again. She willfully, knowingly, and deliberately used sperm from a man that she had divorced well after they'd split up and without his permission, and is now carrying a child. His child, one she expects him to support. So safe did she feel in doing it, so proud in fact that she did it, that she took to Instagram to brag about it in a now deleted post. And while, yes, some people have called her out for her despicable act, there are plenty who are cheering her on and supporting her for doing it. It speaks to just how accepted and condoned the practice is worldwide, legally, morally, and ethically. It speaks to how women have no problem taking to social media to brag about denying the man the right to choose, the right to decide if he wants to be a parent or not. Fact is, in my opinion, this is a form of rape, plain and simple, and why it's the worst double standard that exists. Though, of course, again, you're never going to hear it called that, and it sure as hell isn't going to show up in any of the statistics. You know, the statistics that feminists love to go on and on about to paint men as awful, misogynistic, and downright dangerous. What this really is a beautiful example of the absolute double standard and hypocrisy that exists when it comes to the entire reproductive rights argument. A double standard that ignores the man that is the victim, a victim who will suffer mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and yes, financially for the rest of his life. And he'll never get a shred of caring, compassion, or concern for what was done to him. It is the ultimate double standard. Can you imagine what would happen if the roles were reversed and her ex-husband took her frozen egg and created a child without her consent or knowledge? At best, he'd be destroyed on the internet. At worst, and dare I say most likely, he'd end up in prison. And I'd argue in that case, rightfully so. But when a woman does it, it's called being brave. It's called empowering. It's called being a strong and independent boss bitch. And the man forced into supporting a child he never wanted, never consented to having, well, he's expected to shut up, pay up, and take responsibility. To be a good father. Miss Si-young even went so far as to admit while there may be many difficulties in the future, she, and I quote, wants to believe her choice now is more valuable. Let me repeat that. Her choice is more valuable. And that is the exact mindset that feminism, the Democratic Party, and most women these days have. That a woman's choice is more valuable than a man's, to the point that in their mind, it's perfectly okay to deny a man's right to choose completely. Because, well, he isn't entitled to any rights, because he's a man. Let's be crystal clear here. Consent shouldn't be a one-way street, and shouldn't end just because a child can be created. Consent doesn't just apply in the bedroom, it applies in reproduction too, including reproduction through IVF. But this is the world that men live in today. A man can say, I don't want a child. I don't consent to being a parent. I wasn't even involved in the decision. And the law looks at him and says, too bad, so sad, buddy. Pay your support or go to prison. But a woman, well, she can jack his sperm at will to create a child. She can then terminate it, keep it, adopt it out, or surrender it to the government without the man's consent, without even his knowledge, and have no further obligations. All based on her feelings, her choice, her autonomy. Yet the argument is that it's women's rights that are under attack. Yeah, okay, Felicia. It also shows the fallacy of the existence of a patriarchy that they drone on and on about. It shows how in reality it is a faketriarchy. Let's think about it. If, as they argue, there is an entire system whose sole purpose and design is to benefit men and hurt women, well, that argument goes right out the window in this case because, as we've just shown, this situation only benefits women and harms men. How can any reasonable person make that argument knowing that reality? Knowing the reality that when it comes to choice, women have all the rights and men, not a single one. And we'd have to say the patriarchy must be doing a terrible job, since in fact it has built an entire system around protecting her rights while denying his. Yeah, I know. Make it make sense. But that also speaks to how we men are our own worst enemies. Because yes, we bear some of the blame, perhaps even most of it. It is without question that this man, Cho Se-hung, hopefully I'm saying that right, did not consent to having this child. And yet, he's speaking out saying he'll fulfill his responsibilities, as many others, including men, are saying he should do. He should step up and be a father to the child. And while that all sounds noble, when you could legitimately argue, perhaps, that he should, the fact is, it's not his decision to make, because legally, he has no choice. In practice and on paper, the law is clear. He will be required to step up and fulfill his responsibilities. So there isn't any choice to be made. The choice has been made for him by a woman who put her personal needs and her rights before his, or even the child that was created. The fact is, he never consented in any way to parenthood and the accompanying responsibilities. He had it forced on him. No consent, no consideration, no right to say no. And here's a kicker for you. In fact, he did say no. That sperm was not supposed to be used. It was scheduled to be destroyed. But she raced the clock, beat the system, and implanted the embryo anyway. And now he's legally shackled to a decision he never made. Tell me, how is this not theft? How is it not rape? And let me ask you something else. What other context in life or in the law allows someone to take part of your body without consent and create a life that you're now legally bound to for the next 18 plus years with no option to escape? Only men face this level of forced accountability. Only men are told, you didn't choose this, but we're still going to hold you responsible. As I said, the entire pro-choice argument is a complete sham. It's not based on equality, it's based on obligation. As in, women have no obligations while men have nothing but. And let's flip it to really drive this point home. Imagine a divorced man takes his ex-wife's frozen eggs, fertilizes them without her knowledge, and then has them implanted in a surrogate or multiple surrogates. Then he says, hey, you're the mother. I expect you to co-parent and help pay for this child. The outrage would be incredible. Politicians, the media, feminists would all be foaming at the mouth. Women's groups would be calling for criminal charges. They'd be launching campaigns to get that man held accountable. He'd be doxxed and destroyed on social media. They'd be calling him controlling, abusive, a reproductive predator, and those are the nicer things. But because in this case it was a woman, it's seen as emotional, complex. Yeah, really, somebody said that. It's sad, but understandable. We're told to sympathize with her decision while ignoring the fact that she violated his rights, denied him his rights. This isn't about celebrity gossip. This is about a man who had no reproductive choice because the law, as written and in practice, does not give him one. This is about how no man has any reproductive choice. It's about how men's consent is optional, not required. But their responsibility, well, their responsibility is mandatory. And until we have a real conversation about reproductive equality, until these type of injustices are addressed, until the pro-choice lobby admits the blatant gender bias that exists in their argument, well, men will continue to be held financially, emotionally, and legally hostage to decisions they never made. The situation as it exists proves that crime does indeed pay. Because right now, in the eyes of the law, women have reproductive rights, men have reproductive obligations. That's not equality, that's exploitation.